Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, well, like I will say that we do need to be out of here by 4:30. There's a few of us, I think, heading down to Roxy with regards to supporting Whale Song, which is kicking off around 6:30 in Miramar, which will be very, very interesting to see how that goes. So, look, welcome, everybody. Welcome to the third meeting of the Social Sustainability Committee. Great to see you all here. Hope you're all fit and healthy. Some basic housekeeping, as you well know. Toilets are out that way, through that door. If there's an earthquake, you know, nice strong tables, either that or I'll race you to the door. Other than that, I just wanted to introduce Steffi to the table here on my right. Here's Democratic Services Support. Of course, Janice here on my left as Senior Leadership Support there as well. And Rob hanging over there as well as Deputy Chair, my man. Down on it. So look, we'll get underway. We'll start off with the council blessing. Lawrence.
Pretty sure that's why we have these bits, these iPads. Here we go. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just, so that with courage, vision and energy we provide positive leadership in a spirit of harmony and compassion.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lawrence. I also just wanted to check, do we have anyone online at the moment?
Not currently.
Not currently. Interesting. Okay. Radio, any apologies? No apologies? Any apologies from our EV partners at all? Can that please be noted?
There are no apologies.
Yeah, and there are no apologies from our EV partners either.
We just know if there are none.
Hmm.
So we've just had Chris at Kāpiti Youth join.
Fabulous. Okay. Any declarations of interest in relation to any of the agenda items today? No? Fantastic. Public speaking time in relation to items relating to the agenda. Do we have anyone as such? No? Okay, thank you very much, Steffi. Moving on to number 6, members' business.
Mr. Chair?
Sorry.
Matter? Could I please raise a matter under members' business?
Look, going to be a slightly different, yes you can, but I'm actually going to be moving members' business to the end of the meeting.
Oh, that's right, I'm back to the end.
Yep, so, but that is flagged, Kathy. Yep. So do we have any leaves of absence being required? Thank you. No, or matters of an urgent nature. Nothing's been brought to my attention in that space. Okay, and I've added a point C to members' business. I'm going to move that till after public excluded reports. And that gives us a chance. I have some things there that are in front of you at the moment, just bringing your attention to these photocopies there. The top one is actually from Stephen Cross, who is our Housing Program Manager, which is just lead into the information he's going to be presenting today. The other ones are, well, I'll leave, they're issues, I suppose, that are coming to the table, which will be tabled during members' business, and we'll deal with those then. But if you do get a chance, do have a flick through them as well, although I think pretty sure they were emailed around as well. So we'll head on to 7, updates. 7.1, implementing the housing strategy update on work with Kāpiti Youth Support and other transitional housing providers, which is coming in from Mr. Stephen Cross. Please take it away, sir.
Good afternoon. I tabled this update, which is an update on implementing the housing strategy, and particularly our work with the Kāpiti Youth Support and other transitional housing providers. Just note there's one thing to update you on. On point 12, I talk about introducing KYS to Bode Housing, and I indicate that KYS at that point was not considering furthering that work with both. They're actually reconsidering that at the moment. I thought you should know that.
Excuse me, Stephen, I just wanted to check how you're looking at approaching this. This document, has everyone actually, did they receive this document before the meeting as such and familiar with it? Okay, so we'll take the document. Okay, oh, that's right, it was on LG Hub as well, wasn't it? Okay, so we'll take that document as read then. But anything you might want to highlight, Stephen?
I was wanting to highlight the different ways that we are implementing the housing strategy and the different roles we're using. And in this case, we're facilitating and coordinating activities of government agencies to assist the Trust to establish transitional housing.
Sorry, if I may also add, I think of interest to this committee, one of the things that we've been thinking about is giving you examples of ways in which we're working in the community, but also to highlight where there might be occasions where there's difficulties in some of our providers either being able to manoeuvre through process or between local and central government. And I think the example that we've set out here is really interesting because part of the challenge I think that we've been supporting KYS with is actually a difficulty in manoeuvring between Kāinga Ora and MHUD's process and how they themselves work together. But the fact that there are some spots where it's either very grey in terms of what needs to happen, but also that there might be an opportunity for you as subcommittee, but also for council, to be thinking about how we advocate for these moments as well, because this seems to be an example of just how difficult it can be for a provider that's trying to do some really good things in the community and to set up some new things to actually get the support it needs for that to happen. So that was part of what we wanted to raise to your attention today.
So in regards to that, do we have any questions at all?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Chair.
Lawrence?
So, thank you for the reports, Stephen. I found it interesting reading and interesting to see, as you've highlighted, Chris, the challenges in connecting with the different government departments that are involved in this space. I guess my question is related to the other work that we've got on in this housing space, particularly around the Community Land Trust or the Affordable Housing Entity. And seeing these challenges that exist for some of our organisations and locally, would you envisage that we're going to see a similar challenge for whatever we stand up in that space, in that affordable housing entity space, of having to navigate these same issues?
I think those issues will still exist, but this is an organisation that isn't experienced in the housing area specifically. They're more of a social service agency or and health agency. And what I find really interesting is that I don't think you should have to have a really good understanding or knowledge of the housing system to receive service from a government agency. It seems that's not the case. You do have to have an understanding of the system. And I would assume that the new entity would have people involved who do have an understanding of the housing system.
Okay, so I guess my conclusion out of that is we need to make quite a strong note for us and some recommendations maybe from this committee, Mr. Chair, towards that discussion around the affordable housing entity, that we ensure that there is the expertise on that group, whatever is stood up in the end, that enables this navigation to happen easily.
Yeah, look, I hear what you're saying, Lawrence. I think part of the kaupapa around the trust is it is supposed to be skill-based as well. But yeah, I think noting that definitely would be something to include in our terms of reference as such. Can I perhaps just check with Chris around this? This subcommittee is that, a subcommittee, and to me, we will be working through scenarios or issues as part of a policy or strategies journey, if you like, and potentially us being at the beginning of that journey. Would it perhaps be suitable to be workshopping some of this stuff as a committee? I mean, the point that Lawrence raises is valid. After saying that, something like the CLT, this is the rub, I guess, with bringing in committees at the beginning of a triennium when we're already halfway through a piece of work. As such, what do we bring through the committee to work on, and what goes directly to, say, a strategy and ops or a council meeting, even a workshop with councillors, as such. But I certainly see that move. That's maybe an area that we need to workshop, maybe as a council, because this has progressed as far as it has. Perhaps a conversation to take offline, maybe.
Yeah, I think there may be two things here. I think to the point you've raised, Deputy Mayor Kirby, I think that you have brought up a point around making sure we understand where everybody fits in the housing system, and that needs to be set out, because we need to be really careful that as we, or if we decide we are going to stand something up, that we understand where it fits and what we want it to do within that system. So I think that point's really valid, and I think, Mr. Chair, that we should and will definitely workshop that, whether it's through here or in a workshop-styled setting, so that we can make sure we're comfortable with that. I think the second point I would raise is I think there's an opportunity for this committee to also think about its role in advocating for providers in our district. And I think the point that Stephen's made around you shouldn't need a degree to be able to manoeuvre through a process, particularly KYS, and I guess I might be doing an advertisement for them right now, but they're a one-stop shop. That's what they pride themselves on for people under the age of 25. And the fact that they're trying to lean into something where they see that there's a gap in our community, but it's very hard to be able to progress forward, seems to me something that we might want to talk to Kāinga and MHUD when they're next here, to understand how they might be working through those kinds of issues. So I think there's a really good opportunity for us to feed back with examples, so that it's not abstract conversation we have, but real examples that we can put on the table to say, hey, we've helped out here, but really this is something that we'd like to understand how we're going to progress that with a more permanent solution going forward, so that others don't find it as hard to engage.
Can I
Yes, certainly, Lawrence.
just follow up with that? I wonder whether we need to get something in writing.
Funny you should say that, because it's just the advice I just had whispered in my ear with regards to that. I think it's an excellent idea. The point of this committee is to give recommendations. So yes, I'd like to capture that as a recommendation. Is there anything you'd like to, any particular way you'd like to word that at all?
That's a good question. Well, how about I think about it? There's some others who want some questions, and here we can work on something offline.
That's great. And look, I guess this is, before I move on to Mr. Wilson, to me, this is a space we're sort of in with housing in regards to this committee at the moment, I think, is because a lot of that high level, I mentioned this last time, a lot of that high level stuff's been done. We're getting closer to the rock face, and now we can actually address nice juicy issues and look at ways that we can help our community achieve the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So I think this is a fantastic piece of work around this. Stephen. Nigel.
Okay. Just a couple of things that spring to mind. Yes to a workshop around this, because there is, there's a knowledge gap for me. I mean, perhaps I'm just not running fast enough, but there is a bit of a gap in, about who the players are, and I just automatically just start putting shutters around when I see the Wellington Company doing anything. That gives me some cause for concern. I just wondered, I know KYS are taking an holistic approach to this, because a lot of their clients are sitting on couches. So homelessness and the state of people's homes is one of the primary it's one of the primary reasons that people use KYS in the first place, actually. Either their home background or the lack of a home or whatever. But anyway, so I understand that. Question is KYS filling a gap because nobody else is able to fill the gap, or are they filling the gap because they perceive a need? And given that that's not what KYS's expertise is, so how do we? So if we are going to go, yeah, that's great, good on you, go down that rabbit hole. Are we going to throw them ladders and things and introduce them, or are there other providers who could be doing what KYS want to do in the housing space, and they can focus on that? So I just wonder, has there been a kind of a round table with providers in this space where they all get together and say, this is what we all want to do? Because it seems like there's a lot of people who want to do good things. So that's a question. That's the primary question for me.
So just distilling that down a little bit, you wanting to know whether there's a situation we can be bringing in the different players, or potentially has anything been facilitated around conversation with them, basically all in one room, so that we're on a similar kaupapa. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and really it's about, I've identified a need, but am I the best person to fill that need? Is there somebody else who already knows what needs to be done? They're already set up, they're geared for it, maybe they haven't been, maybe whatever, who knows what the reasons are. But yeah, that's my concern, is that you get an organisation jumps into the space because they've identified it with their clients. But is there somebody else out there who can do it, or do it better, or da-da-da?
Thanks.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Any comments from officers around that?
I think some of the things you raise are things that the group would have to answer themselves in terms of what they considered when they decided that they wanted to put this in place. I do think you start to point to the housing continuum and different types of housing and social housing, and that's part of the issue with the Kāinga supported living or supported housing. They're more set up for situations where agencies are contracted with the Crown for services like women's refuge, for example, where there's a really clear distinction. Transitional housing is quite slightly different, so yeah, it doesn't really answer your question. But there is, I think, there is a group that meets that talks through housing issues, and there are representatives from a range of organisations. It's quite small, and it would be good if it grew. And it was at the catalyst for that was a person who has a particular concern around homelessness.
And just one other quick thing is this: if you did a quick tiki tour of the motels of Kāpiti, you would find that the substantial number of the rooms are let to people in emergency housing. And I know of some people who've been in the same motel now for over a year. And they tend to disappear off everybody's radar, and it becomes a central government function because that's the agency that's dealing with them. But it has two impacts in Kāpiti. Well, the primary impact that it has is that there's nowhere for tourists to stay when they come here.
Sorry, Mr. Wilson, is there a question here?
Well, yeah, the question is, what investigations are we doing in that area?
I think this is the need to develop more transitional housing as a response to people being in emergency housing. I think transitional housing is different in that there is a service component alongside the accommodation, and it's a longer period as well. So we are definitely advocating for the provision of more transitional housing in the district. We have quite low numbers of transitional housing spaces compared to other areas. So part of the government agency meeting that we've established is to highlight that issue and talk to MHUD in particular about the need to purchase more services.
Lovely. Thank you, Rob.
Oh, through you, Martin.
And just noting, Kim, I
Chair
have seen you
Martin.
behind me as well.
This is a question too. Could we possibly have a workshop on this issue, or perhaps an urban panel? I mean, we've got two KYS board members here, ex-board members here, and in all fairness, Kāpiti Youth Support have experience in moving existing housing stock onto their existing land facility there. It's under treaty settlement, so there's a bit of an issue there. One of the houses that was moved onto the site, 10 years ago, is now, has been a classroom, a school for excluded students. And two other houses have been moved on to connect with the existing facilities. So they're into using existing housing stock. They have the experience in doing this. So in all fairness, but perhaps we could have a workshop to sort out these issues, these details, because they are detailed matters, and we have to make a value judgment on them.
Happy to have that conversation with you offline, Rob, in our housing hui that we have. Right. We've got to be a little bit careful that we're not getting too far down in the weeds with regards to things. I see our role as a facilitation role, as such. Maybe some provision, but that'll be further on down the track. But your point is noted.
Thank you.
Kim.
Kia ora. Yeah, I have similar thoughts to, I think it was Councillor Wilson, talking about, are they the best people to be doing this? So when I talk to people on the ground, a couple of the things that come up are, we get these projects and we get these organisations and they do all these great things and they provide a big report, and that's great and lovely. And I don't want to get into the details, and I'm not saying that any of these initiatives aren't good, because they do. Every of them works in their own way and they have their own benefits. However, we talk about transparency a lot, and lately that has been changed to honesty. Are we really being honest about the results of these initiatives? Are we really, or are we just, we seem to gloss over and say we've achieved these great things, but are we actually measuring how effective, and I know it's hard, these initiatives are? Because I am of the same thinking, is that we have a limited pool of resources between Crown agencies, local government. We have 10 people dipping into those resources, all reinventing the wheel on their own, and using those resources just to get to that level. Then none of those resources actually trickle down to the coalface. So they get caught up in bureaucracy, not for lack of a good intention. And you talked about there's a group of people that sit together. So to me, if there's already a group of people that talk in terms of this kaupapa, then how effective have they been if the discussion is still going on? And maybe it is the connections that need the work, as opposed to everyone going off and doing things on their own. Because that's what it seems to be. This one organisation has all this great information, and then goes, okay, we'll go down this track, but there's already 10 people down that track. So my question is, can we measure how effective these initiatives are? And it's also about us being really, really honest with ourselves about, are we the best people to do this? Are we actually, like, how many family can we count that we put into a house? Are there measures like that? We get a percentage, so I've listened to reports, and I'm just using Zeal as an example. Great organisation, do great things. So they gave a report, and it had, there was a 30% percentage of Māori and something percentage of something else, which sounded great. But in reality, that was 7 children that came to their hangouts, 1 or 2 of which were Māori. So when you put it in that light, it doesn't seem as grand, is what and that's what I mean about being honest. So that is my question, beat around the bush. Are we measuring honestly how effective the people and the initiatives in these spaces are?
Anyone care to take a stab at answering that?
Thanks,
Feel
Kim.
free not to.
No, I think it's it's a really great question. I think the update that we provided today on our work with Kāinga Ora, MHUD and KYS, that wouldn't have happened, mainly because that wasn't the focus of what we were trying to achieve through that process. That said, I think you raise a really important point in that as we start to progress in our new performance framework that we're pulling together with you, we should really be starting to put those tangible outcomes from initiatives on the table so that we can say, here's what we would like to achieve, and then we should be looking at whether the funding and support that we provide to others is helping us to do that. So I think maybe I'm leaving you with, we have that written down. As I look at the team, we will come back to you on that point.
I guess, look, and I hear what you're saying. Sorry, no, Stephen, you please continue.
I was just going to point out too that the funder is in this mix as well. So the purchaser of the service, who will be monitoring the effectiveness of that service. And so there is a distinction between the roles.
And look, I just wanted to point out as well, I hear what you're saying, Kim. You know, there's that blurry point between what is a percentage and what is a number, which can be very easy to manipulate results in relation to that. But look, I just want to highlight again, KCDC, the council table made the call to get more involved in housing in the last triennium and has spent that time developing the higher level pathways that are now in place to be now addressing these sorts of situations which are closer to the rock face. Every point that's been brought up, very relevant. And we are putting a framework together about what does that look like for council, I dare say. And I think it's great that we're in that facilitation role, not that delivery role, we're in that facilitation role, and we're able to utilise the contacts and the skills that our managers have in those spaces. And we're seeing great results this triennium, not taking anything away from the last triennium, different kaupapa. So this is, to me, this is great to see, because we are seeing an issue here and we're helping to resolve it with a tangible outcome for people that need housing. So I think that I personally think that's great. But where does our role fit in amongst all that? Well, that's part of, I think, the journey we're going to have with this committee over the months to come. That's a fair comment, hopefully. Sophie.
Yeah, kia ora korua, and thanks, Chair, for allowing me to ask a partai despite not being a part of this subcommittee, but grateful to be at the table. And also just acknowledging as well that I am a current trustee of Kāpiti Youth Support, so wearing my Pakikeriki Raumati Ward Councillor hat in this kōrero. Really wanted to congratulate the team on the role that we're playing in the facilitation space, and wondering what other social sector organisations we're playing a similar role for, if there are kind of parallel conversations that are happening to support other social sector organisations within the district in the same sort of way, because I think that, as Kim has touched on, there are quite a few of them, which is a great problem to have. The fact that there's so many people wanting to support and do great mahi on the ground. But yeah, how we figure out that we're reaching all of those different social sector organisations that might be having trouble with the system or navigating it. I wonder if you can provide a bit of background on that, specifically in the housing space.
Okay.
Yeah.
we're
Sorry,
just looking
just
at
to
each
tag
other
it on.
like social housing.
Housing.
I think I will say that I think anybody who's involved in housing, health, the social sector knows that there is a very fine line and very invisible wall between services that occur. So I think the reason that we put this example on the table is for the very fact that the Kāpiti Youth Service is working across a number of different areas, and it highlights that actually engagement when you are a small provider, in a district such as Kāpiti, where although we do have a series of providers, it's not as large as some other districts. and the number of providers that are in place, it can be really difficult to manoeuvre with your kāinga oras, with MHUD. Nobody has said this yet, but with the Ministry of Social Development, who are the other side of this conversation. And so what we are trying to do in the housing space in particular is start to get all the people, both locally and at a central level, hopefully in the same place at some point, so that we can talk about what works really well and what's actually really hard. And today was just really the start of that. So you can expect to see more from us in this space. And I certainly don't want to use an awful word, but I think we're starting to shift more into a systems approach to this, so that we can start to say, actually, how do all the pieces of the puzzle fit together, so that we all understand our roles. We can also have somewhere where we talk about issues and do so in a way that, particularly for a provider, doesn't make them concerned that it might impact their ability to source funding. And back in that facilitator role, we believe that as we talk to you more about council and local government's role in helping to support local-led solutions, how we do that in a facilitated way. So that's a roundabout way of me saying, Councillor Henford, that this will be the first step in a series of steps in this space, and to also acknowledge that we're working very closely with our connected community colleagues to make sure that we are connecting up some different conversations as we go forward. So there'll be a bunch of us trying to sort of manoeuvre through this space with our local partners.
Yeah, just one more quick question off the back of that. So great to see that there is kind of that coordinated approach starting to emerge. I guess what I'm trying to also get a sense of is whether those conversations would just be happening between kind of council, MHUD, kāinga ora, MSD, and how we then bridge the gap or kind of bridge that conversation between the group of agencies and then the actual social sector organisations on the ground, like what that interface will be in the longer term once that system is established to serve that purpose.
I've set up that monthly meeting with the government agencies so we can talk quite openly and freely, but I'm also inviting people to come into that meeting. So for example, I'm arranging at the moment for the housing navigator to join us to have a conversation, because I really want the agencies to hear about the on the ground experience around need, things like that.
Cool, that's great.
Well done, Stephen. I had no idea you're going to approach that one. Look, and I guess part of the system, and I sent out an email during the week that had links to our housing strategy, housing needs assessment, all those sorts of reports. I do suggest you familiarise yourself with them, because we're basically at the rock face of this now, and I would expect that these sorts of updates to be coming in fairly regularly on different aspects, because the team's working to a strategy that's already in place. They have outcomes that they need to achieve. So we're in motion. And this is a great way for that report back to come. But some excellent questions. Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A very good report, and I've got notes scribbled over everywhere, but it will wait, and most of them can wait for the workshop, which is really, really good. So thank you for the report, and Mr. Chair, if you just be a bit patient with me. Just talking about, I'd just like to say I really support Kāpiti Youth Support. I left home when I was 15, and I stayed at a Catholic girls' hostel, and I'm still alive, and it probably saved my life. So I understand where some young people actually do need to get out of home and have somewhere safe to stay. And so I support Kāpiti Youth Support with whatever, and I think it's really good that council does. But I think as Mayor Martin Halliday says, it's time to stop talking, I think, now and see some action on the ground and some things happening. There's been a lot of talk done over the time. But it's just also page 8 on number 6. Be supported to plan for growth in ways that meets the needs of current and future communities. What do you mean by needs? I mean, some of our community is saying that we need a hospital up here and improved health services and that. And I know without good housing, we don't have good health. And also B, ensure that the unique characteristics and needs of respective communities can be nurtured and maintained. Well, I've lived here since the 1960s and been involved in the building industry ever since, and still are. So just wondering, our communities haven't kind of like in the past respected the, you know, the way things have grown in our district. So how do you intend to change that?
Councillor Spears, I think those questions might relate to the next item. I'm looking at the team down there, and if we might be able to hold those for that session, is that all right?
Yeah.
But very valid questions, and we'll come back to those.
Okay, so I'm looking forward to the workshop, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
Yeah, that'd be
We'll
great.
see what we can
Thank you.
facilitate.
Yeah.
Lawrence, you wanted to say something again?
I don't really have a question. I just want to make a couple of comments in this housing space. Is that
Certainly.
suitable? You can say no. I'm quite happy.
Oh, okay. No.
Okay, great.
Nah, I'll let you off. Look, I'm dying to hear what you've got to say, Lawrence.
I just the first thing, thank you, Stephen, for this update and the work that you're doing in this space. And this is probably just an encouraging point to Sophie's questions and also to the one Councillor Wilson brought up in regards to KYS. KYS, one of the things about transitional housing, as Stephen has already mentioned, one of the key things of it is the wraparound services that go with it that are provided by the housing provider. KYS has wraparound services that already exist, so they're perfect to put a housing in with that because they're not having to create anything else to wrap around. So that'd be my first thing there. The second one is there is a lot of conversation going on across the housing continuum in Kāpiti. We only have 2 transitional housing providers here in Kāpiti, the Salvation Army and Aotearoa have two spots, I think, and the Salvation Army has about 17, I think. So about 19 in total in Kāpiti. Those groups are in communication with each other and others that are involved and interested in that housing space. There are regular meetings happening. It's just this next stage which Stephen's working on of that, bringing that together with the government agencies so that we can talk about dealing with the issues that we're about to address through these recommendations we'll talk about. So thank you for your giving me leeway, Mr. Chair.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll wind that one up. We have recommendations up here. What's the best process for... Can we
I'll
have a
move those, Mr. Chair.
Okay, can I have a seconder for that movement? Any discussion?
No, I'll waive.
Okay. Anyone care to vote on that? Moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands or please voice? Any dissent at all? Lovely. That's great, thank you. Also, the paper that Stephen brought to the table wasn't actually included in the agenda.
So it's been tabled as part of that.
It's been tabled part of that? Great, I can't see it, sorry, so these guys are here. Fantastic, it's all tied in together?
Yeah.
Excellent, so we'll move on to 7.2. Thank you very much, Stephen and Chris. If I could ask Dave and, oh, Janice, you're this as well, Dave Hardy. Okay, got the big guns coming out.
Are you minding Dave or minding me? That'll depend on the answer, yeah.
Okay, if I could have everyone's attention. We're at 7.2. The Newhanga Community Centre update from Dave Hardy, Manager Project Management Office, and Sean Mellon, who I think needs no introduction.
Well, while you're figuring out who Sean is, I'll kick us off with some introductions through you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I think I described this the other day as it's been a long time between drinks in terms of updates for you all around Te Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre. So we're very pleased to be providing you with this update today. I am the project sponsor for this activity, so you'll hear a little bit from me, a bit more from Dave as the head of the project management office, and I'm sure from Sean, depending on which bits he thinks we get right or wrong. So let's just see how that goes. Today we are going to provide you with some background on Te Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre, noting that although some of you will have been around the table for earlier conversations around the community centre, it may be more new for others of you. So we will take a bit of a look back. We'll update you on the work that has been carried out since the centre closed in 2021, and we'll outline the next steps for the project. So we do have some slides today. There's also a wee video to watch, and we ask that if we could please keep questions to the end of the presentation so that we can make sure that we've got all of the context and background on the table before having some discussion. So with that, I think we can move on. So a bit of background for you. The Te Newhanga Kāpiti Community Centre, as I'm sure you all know, was built by the community for the community.
Sorry guys, I think it's interrupting. So guys, can we just have your attention here, please? Be much appreciated. It's a bit distracting if you guys all having a little chat over there and a bit of a Google.
So, community centre built by the community for the community following a significant fundraising effort. There had been an earlier community centre, I'm reliably informed, over on the other side of the railway lines for many years, but the current community centre has been in place since 1996. The name Te Newhanga was gifted by the local hapu, Te Uri o Te Ngarara, and that is of significance to them and has been of significance to us in that time as well. The arrangements around operating Te Newhanga have taken several different forms over the years, but up until 2018, the day-to-day operations of the centre were run by trusts or organisations that were independent to the council. However, in 2018, the council stepped in what was initially expected to be a short-term kaitiaki role while new arrangements were made for the day-to-day operational activity within the centre. Unfortunately, that plan was somewhat foiled by discovering the scale of weather tightness issues related to the building and the mould issues that had created. We attempted to operate within a leaky mouldy building for a little while, but by the time we got to early 2021, it became apparent that ongoing activity within the centre was incompatible with the mould in particular that had been created due to the water ingress issues, and primarily for health and safety reasons, the centre was closed. I think another important piece of background to note at this stage is that the community facilities strategy, which many of you will be familiar with, identifies the building as being used by more than one community within the district. Therefore, it is a district-wide facility within the context of that strategy. And I think I'm handing over to Dave now. Oh no, I'm not. We have a wee video for you. For those of you that, if any of you were not familiar with what life inside the community centre when it was operating looks like, this little video may cast some light on that for you. Thank you, Katie.
Today we're running our community day, and we just brought a whole heap of community groups and just getting the community together.
Right. So how does this project align with Council's strategic priorities? You might be familiar with this slide, hopefully. So how does this project tie in with your priorities? And we've highlighted a few of them. Priority D specifically by building strong community centres, both precincts and physical buildings, and progressing community hubs in Paraparaumu, Waikanae and Otaki, and ensuring we partner with iwi. Priority J, specifically by engaging well and building a sense of security, sense of community. And priority K, specifically by reporting meaningfully on progress, including our effectiveness in addressing need and improving well-being, while improving residents' bang for buck. This project is a key initiative in the long-term plan for community facility and community support activities, with $5 million budgeted for rebuild or replacement. There has been no allowance for operational funding at this stage, and this will be addressed when the building direction and operational model has been decided. Connection to other work streams. We need to keep in mind this project is connected to a number of other work streams within the district. The town centre, Paraparaumu town centre revisioning, the location of the community centre could be impacted by the revisioning plan. The Waikanae Library and Service Centre project. These two projects are progressing pretty much at the same time and are aligning with the changing model of community facilities to multifunction hubs. The conversations and learnings during community engagement at both community and district level will be relevant to both projects. Otaki will be following this project with the library and hall up there, and this will inform, these projects will inform us how that might shape up. But also we've got an opportunity to consider and incorporate the current focus on Otaki's youth space. We have questions of how the indoor sports facility feasibility study and EDKB's work around an education hub align with the community centre. There are also proposals for the land adjacent to Newhanga, and the Wharamaku Park concept has included community facilities, and we need to consider the impacts these centres might have on Te Newhanga.
Thank you. So, we have been doing some work since the centre closed. I think the first one that it's important that we draw your attention to is that we have spent time exploring opportunities with the Nāhina Trust that owns land in the town centre that I know all of you are familiar with, I'm sure all of you are familiar with. There were early conversations with the Trust around the potential of the Trust partnering with the Council to deliver a new community centre, potentially on Trust land holdings within the town centre. And at the time, the representatives of the Trust that we met with indicated that they, as a landowner and as a hapu and whānau with a significant history in this space, we're interested in opportunities for there to be more visible, I guess, examples of that, and a more visible presence for them within the community. These discussions were put on hold though, while the Trust explores options with other potential tenants for the same area of land that would potentially have implications for what types of activities might sit well alongside each other or which wouldn't. And at the time, there were no conversation about what those types of activities were. So that is something that remains, I guess, essentially on hold, noting that the Nāhina Trust is involved with other conversations related to the town centre. We have also completed a little bit of research to help inform what was going to be the development of the project to rebuild or replace the community centre going forward. So at about the time that the centre was closed to community use, we engaged someone to do a piece of research primarily with existing individuals and groups and organisations that had been using the centre. And really what we were trying to achieve with that was understanding their perspectives on how council and the community might be able to co-design a space to support and strengthen connections, wellness and the resilience of communities. So we were trying to harness their views on what the opportunity was here at a time when their understanding of the community centre and perhaps what we, the opportunity that we were losing for a little while was. So the key insights from that piece of work, well, there were a number, but we've highlighted two on this slide that I think are particularly important. The first was that we heard very strongly that we needed to move away from thinking about or being our thinking being solely focused on the physical building or the current centre. The people that we spoke to saw some opportunities in relation to a community centre for Parapara Umu, that they didn't want to be bound by what's already there. We also heard strongly about the balance that they wanted us to find in our work going forward, and that was a balance between the human values that a centre like that needed to provide and the thoughtful planning and design of how such a centre would be managed and funded, which I guess in our world we would call the operating model. And I think the reason why we heard that is that when the centre closed, we were coming off the back of several years of challenges around how the community centre would operate, what it was there to achieve and the best way to operate it. And I think when you view those two things together, don't focus just on the physical space, and please focus just as much on how council and community can work together to build a sustainable model here. Those are two very important points for us to take forward. There's just a quote that we heard in that research that I'd like to share with you, because I think it does speak to outcomes a little bit. So a shared community space for groups and organisations to come together for the benefit of community wellbeing. That was what people wanted us to be focused on.
In September 2022, Council commissioned a building condition assessment and options report. This assessment noted that remediation of the building appears to be viable, with works including replacing the heavy tiled roof with one that is lighter weighted, and also creating eaves hanging out over the building. Here's an example of the inside. We'd expect probably 50% of the internal bracing and joinery would need to be upgraded or replaced, and the external aluminium windows and doors would all need to be replaced, as would the cladding. This picture here shows the poor ground clearance to the bottom of the cladding, which is one of the major problems with the building. To remediate the building, we'd need to install a concrete nib that's 250 mils high around the perimeter of the building, and also modify landscaping and the external gardens to channel water away from the building and provide some protection. Back to you.
Okay, so we've talked about 2021 and 2022 when we did some work, but where are we at now? It's 2023. What's this looking like? And what are some of the strategic considerations that that you as a subcommittee and the council as a whole will need to keep in mind as work progresses in the next little while? So quite a bit has changed since the community centre closed. So a lot of this is outlined on slides. the next couple of slides, and I don't know that we need story time with Janice where I read all of the bullet points to you, but I think you are well familiar with the challenges because we've talked to you about them in relation to other projects. COVID-related impacts on the construction sector, costs of materials and labour, the challenges that our community faces around cost of living and affordability, and the implications that has for us as a council. A focus on understanding, or I guess placing more focus on the total life cycle cost of what we do rather than the here and now costs to improve things or to build things. In terms of the social and community sector, massive change in that space during and post-COVID. And some of those are highlighted on the slide. Iwi Organisations is one that I particularly want to draw to your attention, taking on, in many parts of the country, including in Kāpiti, new or stronger roles in service delivery. That, I think, has the potential to have a significant impact on how some of the services and activities that might form part of considerations around a community centre or community hub could happen in the future. And obviously, just to re-emphasise, as you are aware from the conversations that my colleagues have had with you around other activities, including the Mahara Gallery within the council, we have a much sharper focus on the operating cost impacts of new and redeveloped facilities that increase service levels and what that means for us. So I think another change is, just to point out, is that we have a new neighbour. No longer for sale, has been sold. The piece of land just next door to the tail end of our civic precinct, purchased by the Wellington Company, who have signalled that they are keen to work with the council in a coordinated way to look at how their development lines up with our broader town centre objectives. So, did I skip a slide? No? Oh, thank you. Page turner, you've got it. So, what we have realised is that there are some gaps in our understanding for us to be able to put the right, well-reasoned options in front of you for considering where to next. A fairly key one is that we need to better understand the aspirations and expectations of our iwi partner Atiawa ki Whakarongotai and the Nāhina Trust. This is not currently an active conversation with Atiawa ki Whakarongotai, but will need to be. And obviously there's a conversation that has started with Nāhina Trust, and we'll need to look at how those two things fit together. I think it's fair to say that because of the change that has been happening within communities and within the social and community sector, that small piece of research that we did immediately after the centre closed isn't enough to make us feel comfortable that we understand the current and future needs that could or should be met by a refreshed community centre, whatever form that took. And obviously, I shared a quote with you earlier about what the people that we spoke to in 2021 thought we should be focused on in terms of a refreshed community centre and what it might achieve. But I suspect that some of their views, if they were expressed to us today, would be quite different. So we don't have a clear sense on what outcomes people might be seeking from a refreshed or rebuilt community centre. So I guess to summarise all of that, or at least to hone in on, I think, what three of the most key issues in terms of gaps in understanding are. We don't have a full picture of what is achievable within the $5 million budget allowed for in the long-term plan to rebuild or replace the community centre, bearing in mind all the things that you've just seen on the previous slide. As part of that, we don't yet have a clear sense of what alternative functionality may be possible if we were to have a play with the layout of the existing centre and see what more we could get out of it. And we also haven't identified suitable operating models and associated costs. And that links back to the fact that we haven't had recent conversations with the community and the social and community centre about what the purpose or outcome sought from a community centre would be. So those are some fairly significant gaps in our understanding at the moment. And I'm going to hand back to Dave to talk about some things we do know.
So we do know the building's uninhabitable, but we do know also that it is at the moment stable. We are undertaking regular air quality checks, and the latest reports showing that there is still mould in situ, which is attributed to the ongoing water ingress. We've identified 4 potential options for the building. The short term, we could remediate the building using the same layout, pretty much like for like, except for a little bit higher off the ground. Remediation of the existing building, but improving the internal layout of the building within the same building footprint. And both of these options have got a time frame of about 60 weeks. If we look for a longer term options, we could fully replace the building with a new design, but within the same location and footprint. And that's got a time frame of around 76 weeks. Or we could go for the bells and whistle approach with a new design and layout on a location to be determined, and that would have a time frame of approximately 3 years plus. So we, in the LTP budget, we have $5 million for CapEx. Some of the options will require significantly more investment, and that would be the options C and D. Our plan moving forwards, and we do have a plan. So the PMO is leading the project with the support of our business owner, the Connected Communities team. Over the next 6 to 8 months, we are planning to articulate and explore options to be able to present well-measured recommendations to Council. Reconnecting with the key stakeholders is critical to our success, as is carrying out a needs assessment to understand social and community sector requirements and begin conversations with central government and social organisations to understand the potential for partnerships and arrangements. We will remain linked to the other community hub projects to ensure strategic alignment and awareness by understanding community conversation, ensuring the district's needs are met. The partner and stakeholder engagement plan is currently being developed and could include some signage and fencing around Newhanga to support engagement. We are also exploring options for developing a meanwhile space to create community conversations about the future. We will complete a structural assessment internally to understand what options might be should we decide to remediate the building with an improved layout, or option B. The recommended function, size, location and budget will be progressed by the end of the year. Finally, project updates will be provided as part of my PMO email update to elected members, with updates provided to this committee, council and Paraparaumu Community Board as required while the project progresses.
So, we've reached the end of our slideshow, and we're really happy to take your questions and to hear your thoughts. I guess for me, this is one of those wicked problems where you are trying. I think where we might find ourselves is needing to try and balance opportunity to design for the future against the constraints of having to build today, and that's a really tricky trade-off that councils across the country and other organisations are having to tackle every day. I was at a forum in town yesterday where Ganesh Nana, the chair of the Productivity Commission, was updating on the piece of work that the Productivity Commission is very close to finalising its report on around equity and equality, securing a fair chance for all. And he spoke to that challenge that I've just described, and is concerned that the cost of living crisis will end up being used to drag everything, as he described, these were his words, back to today, identifying, people thinking that we'll just have to wait until later to fix some of the longer term challenges. So a slightly different take on that issue, but I think it represents the challenge for us, which is affordability versus an opportunity potentially to move into a different type of community facility with this space. So before we move to questions, I just want to double check that Sean doesn't have anything he'd like to add at this point.
No, just here to help out and answer questions if there's anything. But obviously, Dave's relatively new to the organisation, and this project has been to council, and so the project's been going on for a while.
Welcome to the organisation, the family.
And we also have my colleague Mike Mendonça down the back, who I'm sure will be able to help with questions should we need it. So over to you again, Mr. Chair. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Janice. Dave, you get some doozies, don't you? Blue Gum Gorge, now the community centre. Look, with regards to questioning, I just wanted to lay some little ground rules here. First of all, I've got a question for Mr. Mendonça over there. We have maintenance programs on all our buildings now, is that correct? Or are we working towards that as a...
So we're working through asset management plans for all of our buildings. As a result of what happened with Newhanga, we have learned a lot of lessons, and we're in the process of putting in place the appropriate tools, mechanisms and policies to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Fantastic. Thank you for clarifying that. The reason I brought that up is I don't really want to dwell on the past in relation to this space too much. We had a space, or had a space there that was made by the community for the community. Unfortunately, it's in the situation it's in now. But the question is, where to now? The only thing I want to bring up for the moment was with regards to our engagement. Are we talking to Puketapuki Parapara Umu at all as our local hapu in this space? Or is that tied into Nahina Trust?
That's a conversation that we would have with Atiaoki Whakarongotai and the Nahina Trust and seek their advice on who else needs to be involved in that conversation.
Interesting. Okay, opening up for questions, anyone? Rob.
Thanks, Chair Martin. Thanks, Janice, for that report. Just going back, just a comment, the building was built in 1996, and in all fairness, the leaky building syndrome sort of kicked in 2000, so you know, it's got small eaves and monolithic cladding and low clearance to the ground and that, so those can be addressed. I understand a plan was prepared by a consultant some 5 years ago to renovate the whole thing and open it up a bit, and I could supply it if you want. I could supply the plan if you want. But yeah, it's certainly probably good to use take the cladding off and dry it out and put a lighter roof on and put a bit of glass skylighting in the roof and probably extend it here and there. Probably be good to use the old bones for it. Yeah, thank you.
I'd be interested in having a look at that, Rob. I wasn't aware of anything like that at all. I was fairly involved in that process. Oh, there you go. Nigel.
Yep. Just a few observations that might be helpful. Yeah, it's been 5 years. It's had a fence around it for a year and a half or 2 years, but for the 5 years it's basically been unusable. For a substantial portion of the time the meeting rooms weren't available, so the community's been locked out of the space for about 5 years.
Actually, I'll just make a point of clarification there, Nigel. It was being used as we went into COVID as a community space.
Yeah, bits of it were.
Yeah, there's a bit of a difference between.
Anyway, I don't want to argue about it. What I'm saying is that the community hasn't had a community centre, a fully functioning community centre for over 5 years. So I take Mike's point that lessons have been learned. I hope they have. Also, like, just with the name, I don't recall this ever being referred to as anything other than the Nahina Community Centre. That's what it got referred to. That's what the public called it.
Oh, okay.
Not what I... Back in the day when Murray Jensen was the deputy mayor and he was the driver of the Nahina Trust, put 20 grand of his own money into it. That's why the Murray Jensen room was called the Murray Jensen room. And Westpac put money into it. I just wonder what's the the relationship with the existing users, because there were people who used it. It was incredibly well used, actually. So what happened to all of those people? Where did their meanwhile space go? Did they have a meanwhile space? And just, I think one of the things that really needs to be learned about this is to say this is a mirror image of what happened with the Waikanae Library. It's what happened with the Raumati swimming pool. The Raumati swimming pool was allowed to die because we were going to build a new aquatic centre. This was allowed to be ignored because of the overwhelm caused by Te Urahi. Well, I think as a council we need to be able to think about more projects than one at a time. And so was a bulldozer option, that was one of the options. The option that Rob's talking about that came up 5 years ago, what really concerns me is that if you go with the softest option, we're talking about a year and a half or 2 years from the point at which council makes a decision, presumably. So we're still talking, or are we talking from today? When's the earliest that the public could have its community centre back? That's my question.
60 weeks.
I think that option, was it option A or option 1 or 2, was 18 months, 16 months, just over a year, 60 weeks?
60 weeks, yeah.
And we're in May now, so yeah, there'll be some time around, I'm not sure if that includes design.
It's 28 weeks for design and the balance was build.
So just over a year.
Send it through to everybody.
Sorry, I've had a question answered back on that one there. Was there a reason for that? Are you sort of advocating towards a quick solution rather than another option?
Sorry, no, the quick solution ended 5 years ago, where whatever we do now is the very, very slow solution. So if we started with shovels tomorrow, we'd be about 6.5 years away from when it was a fully functioning community centre.
Clarifying that. What was the other point that you were asking about?
Councillor Wilson had asked a question around what has happened to the users. Where have they gone?
Yeah.
And look, we haven't done an exhaustive study on that, but the feedback that I've received is that a number of them have been accommodated in other venues, and that for some there is a challenge around affordability of being able to pay the costs of hireage in those facilities versus the very reasonable community hire rates that were offered at the community centre. But the fact that that is the only information that I have to be able to answer that question highlights that there is some more work to be done to understand that. It might be that who was using the community centre and for what, and how in 2021 might look different in 2023 and beyond, you know, bearing in mind that we do actually need to be planning for the future here too.
Kathy.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I've been to a couple of meetings recently, mental health providers, a couple of those, and they really miss the community centre, so they can all get together and join up and have chats. Also, I went to a meeting at, it was a Strengthening Families meeting in the Aquatic Centre meeting room. Well, it was way too small, and there were people standing outside and couldn't even get into the building. And so the message I'm hearing from our community is that they desperately want they want their community centre back. So moving forward, how are we further engaged? And I'm hearing from people in the community that it's needed. So how are we moving forward with engaging with our communities to find out what actual needs are?
So you've heard Dave acknowledge that there's a plan being developed around that at the moment.
And how long will it take?
Do you have a sense of that?
Can I come back to you on that?
Yeah, it's just that I've been on council for a while, and things seem to take years and years to get accomplished, and I'd like to think that in this day and time that we move things a bit faster forward.
I think
it's not a criticism, it's just,
we're all on board for moving things more quickly, and actually there's some pretty significant time pressures that we're placing on ourselves to make progress as a team, and wanting to surface these conversations with you as quickly as we can. So
yeah, I'm hearing from people in the community that they really miss the community centre and they want it back. So yeah, just to put that out there.
Sorry, hang on, Johnny. The mayor's just. Did you want to jump in there as well?
Oh, I'd really love to. I've got to go actually, but just before I go, I just thanks the team for a start on this. I'm a little bit concerned that we're kind of at the beginning of what could be a really long process, and hearing what Councillor Spires has just said about people missing having a community space. I'm wondering if we could get an option which involves some kind of short-term fix so that we can get the facility open, maybe some costings around that, alongside a longer-term kind of engagement and kind of workshopping and things like that, you know, that longer process to really create something that's fit for the future. But that's going to be a long process, and we're already a couple of years down the track, kind of through no fault of our own. So yeah, we've had it's been really unfortunate, and that's just my top of mind thinking right now. But thanks for the work that's gone on already, and I think our priorities as a council, we've mentioned this again and again, so it's clear from an elected member perspective that this is one of our top priorities to really get cracking on this project, and or some kind of project to make sure that our community has adequate spaces to meet in. Meanwhile, I'm wondering if we could open up this room way more than we do for community use, you know, just use every space that we have in the meantime.
Just the timing. Sorry, Martin.
No, Sean?
Yeah, so actually the plan at the moment is to get a decision, I guess, get enough information back in front of council prior to Christmas to get a decision as to whether it's the full rebuild, relocate, or refit the existing building in some shape or form. Those two options there, and what that might look like. And there is no real short-term, I guess option A or B were the short-term in terms of timeframes to do the physical works. The extent of the problems with the building, you couldn't do that work or do some work to get it open in a safe way in a time frame that would be less than, I guess, what we're working through in terms of the overall program. So what we were looking at, or what we are looking at, I guess, is doing something with the outside of that building, so making something more, because at the moment you've just got fencing there and it looks pretty grim. So as part of that reimagining process and the putting something around it in terms of a fence or hoarding that you can actually have some visual, whether it's a mural or something around it that's painted, or there's some elements to it that we can also leverage off in terms of the process between now and Christmas to talk about what the new community centre might look like or what it might be. So we work through till Christmas, do all the work that Dave's looked at there in terms of further information, come back, get a decision, and then it's into either that 60-week program or the 70, or if the decision is to go for total rebuild, then that again is another process in terms of 3 years. So in theory, you could have something open there. What is that? March 2025, possibly, a bit sooner than that.
And could I also add?
At least a year.
Sorry, Sean. Could I also add to that there is currently no real provision within our operating budgets for operating a community centre. There were some costs, I think, that used to be allowed for within the property budget, but in terms of the operations of the community centre, that was subject to a community contract, I think, with a value of around $30-something thousand per year, but I need to go away and have a look at that. But it was not a huge sum of money, and potentially a more realistic budget for funding the operations of a community centre in such a way that the people that were operating it didn't need to identify commercial avenues to try and afford to do it. That could be a far more significant proposition for council in terms of funding than the $30,000 we used to fund. So the operating costs of whichever whichever option for rebuild or replace would need to be considered in budgets as part of the long-term plan, which I know makes me sound like a really wet blanket when people are very keen to see something up and running, but financially we'd need to work that in from the 24-25 financial year.
Thank you, Janice. Could I ask, is there any leeway for a stepped process in this, whereas some remedial work is done, or a lot of remedial work done, so the building is usable for the next few years, say for argument's sake, while a more longer term option is explored?
Yes, although I would remind you what we've flagged with you in terms of we don't believe we know everything there is to know about what a rebuilt or refreshed building might be used for. Our suspicion is that things have changed, and that although there are some groups that have struggled to find a place to do what they used to do within the community centre, there are others who actually have a new home that they would be quite happy to continue using. So I think that need and purpose piece must sit alongside what could happen with the building.
Thank you. Sean, you had a comment too?
Yeah, just I guess in terms of whatever, I mean, if the council were going to invest something in that building, you'd want to make sure that your investment has got a reasonable, useful life on it. So maybe you invest in the building to turn it, to get it up to standard, but longer term that may not be the site for a community facility. But at least you've got a building that's functional and available if you wanted to dispose of it or do something else with it. So that's basically the 60-week program is to. There is no short-term. Fix the eaves, do a bit of work around the roof, repair the windows that wouldn't involve spending a fairly large amount of money that you would then potentially have to actually go back and, if you're going to do it properly, then you'd do it once and do all the work you needed to do.
Thank you, Sean. Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a user of the community centre, so I do miss it. My question is, what is the square meterage of the building itself at the moment? Because I'm just sort of thinking $5 million, we might be able to do something reasonably decent on the existing footprint.
I think the operation, I don't know the square meterage, but the for $5 million we can do options A and B, which is we could do it up and remediate it and change the floor plan, but we couldn't go outside the building footprint, so to speak, and that is a 60-week time frame.
Yeah.
So we've had advice, sorry, that the pricing was below that $5 million threshold, but with everything that's going on in terms of the market, and we think again if we stuck to that budget, you could do a significant amount to tidy that building up and make it usable. But you wouldn't be able to go up or do anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd like to see something done sooner rather than later. And I mean, the costs of building does not go down, and it's a bit like beer. I wish I'd drunk more and it was cheaper. So I think the time to do something is probably now.
Okay. Do you want to comment on that one?
I don't need to drink so much beer anymore.
Sophie. Oh, sorry. No, hang on. I might just go with Guy first.
Yeah, it's actually just a point of clarification. You mentioned with the current scenario now, the way forward, the project management office. Could you explain a bit about what that is or who that is? I haven't heard that term before.
So within infrastructure, we have a project management office, and they are tasked with delivering projects within the organisation. So it's been in place. It's a new. No, so the last 3 years, so 3 years ago, we set that up to reflect that we needed a bit more expertise specifically to project management. So it's an internal part of the organisation.
Oh, thanks for the clarity, Guy. Sophie.
Just a couple of super quick questions. How are we making sure that we're kind of mapping out other community spaces that might be available for our community and making sure that message gets out to them in terms of kind of having a temporary slightly more organic community hub / centre. And then also tagging onto that how we're working in kind of the same outcomes that we're trying to achieve through the community centre into other projects, like for example our youth development budget, youth services funding, and also through, for example, the Waikanai Library project, so that we can kind of have little mini community centres and spaces across our other projects, so not all of our kind of community gathering space is in one central part of the district.
To your first point, there was a significant amount of work done by the Connected Communities team at the time the community centre closed to help connect people with, community centre users with other facilities. I'll need to look into whether or not we've kept that up for any new people that have come, or new organisations essentially, or groups that have come into the sector since then. I suspect the answer is we haven't, but it's a really good point. In terms of more organic kind of approaches, I just want to go right to the end. There was a reference to meanwhile spaces on one of the slides here, and that is something that we're exploring as part of the project to look at while we're working to figure out what the best options are for you to consider. What can we be doing to activate the community and give them an opportunity to come together and to also, I guess, be involved in the process of figuring out what are the best options. Meanwhile spaces is potentially a concept that some of you are familiar with. There was a bit of activity in Christchurch around meanwhile spaces following the earthquakes, but they are commonly used overseas as well, and in large construction projects in other parts of New Zealand too. So meanwhile spaces can take lots of different forms. Here are some examples on slides, and I'm not going to speak to them, but it's essentially about how can we use existing public areas, maybe in and around the community centre, or elements of the centre itself, for example, the barriers of hoardings that you've heard talked about today, to help create reasons for people to come together. So outdoor space is one example, and here are some different treatments that have been overseas. Creating seating as a way of giving people something to gather around from which other purposes can come. Interactive spaces, particularly in relation to proximity to the likes of the library and the aquatic centre. There's potentially some really cool stuff we could do there as part of seeing the civic precinct as a whole, or playing to more of the artistic and design side of things to look at how we can try and turn the area where the community centre currently is into a space that people still want to be in, despite the fact that there's a building there. And obviously art and design are ways that we can change the feel of that space while we're working on where to next. So it doesn't go entirely to your point. I guess I'm just trying to flag that is something that the project team is starting to do some work on. And in terms of your comments around linkages to other work programs, whether it be the library, whether it be our thinking around youth development, potentially our thinking around age-friendly, a whole host of other things. I think one of the things that has been changing and continues to change within the sector is a shift away from fixed focus community facilities to more multifunctional hubs that potentially perform a range of different functions, maybe not all at the same time. And in that context, we are very mindful of the opportunity to look across some of our different facilities and projects and look at what the combined picture of community space, community activation, and meeting community needs looks like. So yes, we're definitely doing that. And you would have seen the slide at the start of the presentation noting just how many, that's just a small list actually of all of the things in terms of key projects that are underway that we need to look at.
Yeah, awesome. And just to add, obviously there's been a bit of kōrero around whether we would look to just get the current building up to spec or potentially start from scratch. I personally think that we need to think about this project having an intergenerational life. So we can do what we can as quickly as we can, and that's great. But also we could think about the longer term life that really focusing on getting the best possible facility is likely to have, and then to give the community. So I'm personally keen for us to, if it takes a bit longer, to take that time and get something that we can be really proud of creating, instead of just fixing something that's broken, if that makes sense. Yeah,
it does. Thank you, Sophie. Jackie, I noticed you were on Zoom there. Could we...
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Sean. There's a lot of stormwater and wastewater upgrade activity going on in the vicinity right now. But do your the plans right now, as we're looking into this project, include hydrology studies and things, just to make sure that we aren't going to be spending a lot of time and investment in a new building on land that should never have been built on in the first place?
So so certainly if we were going to look at another site, then absolutely all of that information is available. The site as it stands at the moment, I don't think it's in a flooding or a ponding zone or anything like that. And the new modelling work that we're doing at the moment doesn't highlight that. So yeah, it's really just the form of the building that's a problem, not necessarily the location from a flooding point of view.
Lovely. Thank you, Sean. Was that it, Jackie?
Thank you. It's good to hear.
Okay, thank you. Lawrence, you had your light on there. Or something you wanted to add in at all? Oh, do you want to talk to an? Well, I'm not worried. I don't. I think there's an interest there. I don't know if it's conflicted.
Okay. So I just there's been some veiled references to organisations that were using the Newhanga moving to another location. A lot of that has been revolved around Impact Hub over the railway lines on Tongariro Street. I have a conflict there as I'm a trustee of that trust that operates that thing. It is a thing. It's an organic sort of development. But one of the things that I would be interested in probably putting my hat on as a trustee, I need to talk to the other trustees about, is whether we can help the community in terms of, and partnering with council in terms of providing a short-term solution while this process is happening. Because I know one of the issues that we do face is the realities of running buildings and maintaining buildings and keeping those functional for community use at all hours of the day and night is expensive, and so maybe there might be some options there as we're looking for future development on what we're doing there to work with council. So that might be something that I can just throw into the pot of this discussion for a short-term solution that could get something across the line really quickly, that would enable some of these community organisations who are saying they're missing the centre to have spaces that they can use.
Look, thank you for that, Lawrence. It's much appreciated. We need to be thinking of solutions in this space, and what we're hearing here is there are people that are feeling a bit disenfranchised. So any way that we can, I mean, that could be a good interim measure while we're looking at those longer term solutions. Put a sticking plaster on that scenario. I guess from my end, I'm interested to know where we go to from here, and what process there is around making some decisions in this space, I guess. I dare say sooner rather than later. Not necessarily for the entire project as such, but if this is going to be a staged approach, be interested in some guidance with regards to perhaps the next step. Would it be a workshop? Would it be? Not sure here.
So I think you've heard us say today that there's some more work that we need to get on with, and I think you've heard me say that we all appreciate that there's a need for getting on with that quickly. As part of getting on with that work, we'd like an opportunity to continue to connect with this subcommittee to work through things as we see them, and we can certainly bring back an update within the next few months, I imagine, as we've managed to answer we're starting to answer some of the questions that we don't currently have answers to.
That would be much appreciated. Maybe it's something we can take offline for a bit of discussion as well.
Yeah, I was just so we can certainly pull together a more detailed timeline based on those the options you've got there, but also the next 6 months, 3 months. So, and we would do that reasonably quickly and get that background, and then after that, we'd slot in potentially workshop, meeting dates, and again circulate all of that through the subcommittee.
Cool. Look, I just wanted to flag also the Paraparaumu Community Board. This is in there, Lohi, and we have 2 members here. So are you happy for that to be the process of feeding back into the committee as such? Yep. But you can perhaps discuss this at the community board meeting as well. So I think it's very important to keep you guys in the loop as well. The only other thing I'd flag on that conversation as well as Councillor Hanford talked to, being open-minded, you know, we've got potentially whale song going in here. I think there's the makings of a wellness park around here, and some of the pictures that were just up on the screen there could be incorporated into that, or even just the areas around the building here as well. So yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. A pretty exciting opportunity there, and I'd like to try to approach it as an exciting opportunity, but acknowledging the issues that got us to this position as well. So it's good to know that there's work going on to remedy that for the future as well. And with that, we will tidy off that report. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, no, I'm actually going to go through the report, 8.1, and then we'll have a cuppa after that. Okay? Oh, okay. Hmm? Yeah. No, I thought I'd prefer to get this done, have a cuppa, and then go back to public excluded after that. In fact, we can go into public excluded leading into that, and then come back on afterwards. Oh, okay. Kath will be back in just a moment. Ashton, thank you very much. And Hamish, good to see you again. You actually get to sit at the table this time around. And talking on the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, our 3rd quarter report.
So good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who haven't seen me before, I'm Aston. I went away and came back. And hi. Today we're presenting the National Policy Statement on Urban Development for the 3rd quarter. So this covers findings from December 22 through to the end of February 23. This report provides an update and key findings on the monitoring of development activity and urban development indicators in our district. These reports include information on resource and building consent activity from quarter to quarter, with more in-depth information provided annually in the annual report in September. Following on from previous discussions, we have added additional context around our reporting and have identified new affordability measures which are included in this report. These replace the previous measures published by the Housing and Urban Development Dashboard. As noted in the report, both CoreLogic and the CHI, our new affordability measures, do have different reporting periods. This report will also be presented to the Strategy, Operations and Finance Committee on the 18th of May. We will now take the report as read and answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions? Certainly, Mr. Wilson.
The observation is that I'm not quite sure why reports come to this committee and when they're going to go to another committee as a report for this presumably a rerun.
Chris is going to answer that one.
Sure.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson, for that question. I think it would be fair to say that we're finding our feet in terms of where different updates and reports go. At the last Strategy, Ops and Finance Committee, it was suggested we come here with this so that we could have a more detailed conversation in this subcommittee around any points that came through that were of interest, so that when it effectively goes through to the Strategy, Ops and Finance Committee, it might be for a lighter touch point. That said though, one of the things that we are thinking about and would like to come back and talk to this committee about is the frequency of reporting. Because at the moment we are coming and talking in a detailed way about quarterly changes, and every time we talk to you we say to you, hey, it's the annual change that's the one you should focus on. So we think there might be an opportunity to think about how we engage with you on this in a slightly different way. Unfortunately, this quarterly updates come back round, and under current settings we're required to come through. So a really good observation, and we will be coming back to you.
Nigel, did you have a question around that observation?
Whatever I say, and then put a question mark at the end of it. No, just that these are really helpful. They are helpful, especially in the rapidly changing urban environment in which we find ourselves. And national policy statements once upon a time used to be set, and they almost set in cement until the next government came along and unpicked them. And now national policy statements last for as long as the ink in your pen, right? Till the next person comes along with the next bright idea. So keeping us updated, I think, is really helpful. Now, just my point was that if there, and I've got a few observations about this, but I think they're better made in a decision-making body. But I take your point about updates. Yeah.
And look, just I guess talking to what Chris was talking about, we are finding our feet with regards to what information comes through. I guess in the first instance, it's getting our head around as a committee the housing space in general, as a lot of new faces around the table here, and that's a pretty big topic. So this particular brand of information might be more suited maybe next year, as such, once we've sort of got through the process of actually understanding the housing space a bit more. As such, but no, we'll take that on board and discuss offline. Rob.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Martin. Sorry, I'm just losing my voice. No, thanks for that, Aston. Just a question, with the house sale prices decreasing and the rentals decreasing a little bit, and the interest rates going up and building prices going up, have you noticed any developers coming back to review their building consent or their building resource consents applications on the basis that their original schemes are overcooked and too dense and they want to rework it to suit the new climate?
I was looking for Mr. Jamieson in the room, but for some of the information we use, we actually look at the numbers coming through, and we actually look to discount where some potential activities, variations on resource consents, but we don't look at building consents again. So that's something I'll have to defer, and we can actually come back on is it the 18th? And provide a bit of a picture, having a discussion with the building consent team who deal with that activity on the daily basis. Yeah. We tend to look at the numbers and review those from a higher level trend analysis. So yeah, we'll have a chat with them and come back in a week or two and
thank you. That would be appreciated, because we're getting a lot of anxious questions about intensification, as you know, and I think this just might moderate the density of the schemes that these developers are putting in. Thanks.
Good. Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, sorry, just one last one. Around consents process, and given that you're going to come to strategy and ops, I'm still not clear. There was an example of the Vale development in Waikanae where they were building 27 apartments, 6 of them were under offer. It was a significant process of marketing, etc., and they hadn't applied for resource consent. So I'm really interested to know what policies, if any, we have. What's the legal position about developers selling? Like 240 Road 240 Kāpiti Road, for instance, there was a story in the news a couple of years ago now where they were selling like hotcakes. In fact, they were all sold, apparently. No, they weren't. And there wasn't a resource consent at that stage. So I'd just like some clarification around that.
Is it possible to
Not necessarily here, because, you know, if that information is not immediately available, but just as a response, because the same question will come up from me anyway.
Yeah, and I think that might be one that we follow up with, Nigel, and come back to you, even if it's offline, so that we can let you know of our current position on that.
Lovely. Thanks for bringing that up, Nigel. Jackie, my apologies. You have a question?
No need to apologise, Martin. Just a quick question. When you come back to the meeting on the 18th of May, I'm really, really keen to know how the information in this report is disseminated throughout into the building and construction community, because I've always found it really, really valuable for builders, and so much so that I would go and grab every single copy of the agendas, the written agendas, and rip them out and to give them away to builders to have a good read of. And also, just a question, Chris. I'm fairly sure that the quarterly report is legislatively required, but I thought that maybe it could just be in the EMB. So that's me. Okay, I can't hear.
Sorry, I was just waiting to get a red light. That sounds wrong. Rather than green, the red light. Yeah, you're completely on the money, Jackie. It is legislatively required. I think your idea of putting it into the EM bulletin so that you have it, it will be released, I think it's just more, when do we have a detailed discussion around what does it mean? Because I know that you'll all be aware that sometimes you can see quarterly changes, which in the wider scheme of things might actually be seasonal, or they may not be meaningful at all. If they are meaningful, though, we would come back to talk to you about it. So it would be us finding a way to make that happen. And I think, Hamish, I saw you pushing the button about dissemination out to our building providers. So I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, to date we've provided the information through to a number of people over the years who've signed on and identified an interest. It gets published publicly on our urban development capacity website alongside our housing business assessment work. But to date, one of the big things where we've kind of made the linkages and shared back with the sector is we often have development sector workshops and discussions following the completion of the housing business assessment, because that's really a bit of a hallmark period where we bring together a whole lot of analysis around capacity and what it means and the monitoring, and we'll be looking to do that. We've got the assessment underway at the moment that we're hoping to complete in the next 3 to 4 months, and we'll be coming back to brief you, and then we'll be looking to have another session with the development sector to update them on those findings and share what they're seeing and feeling, and more broadly as well.
Good work. Thank you very much. It's good to hear.
Okay, just give an indication. I want to wind someone up shortly, but Kathy? Oh, sorry, Nigel. No, my apologies, Nigel. Yep. Kathy?
Thank you. It's just I've been in Kāpiti for many years, and I've been through lots, and my late husband and my son have been building on the Kāpiti coast and their own businesses for over 50, 60 years or so. And so things have always gone, you know, up and down. So reading through this, I thought it's just another cycle of where things are going, and things will get better. Although I do know that a lot of people at the moment are going to be struggling, because some people are on 2.2% interest and coming off this year and going up to 6.75 or something. So things are looking a bit grim in the building industry, or, you know, for people owning their own homes. But anyway, on page 8, number 6A, be supported to plan for growth in ways that meets the needs of current and future communities. Just wondering how you identify the needs, because I think we need a hospital here. And B, ensure that the unique characteristics and needs of respective communities can be nurtured and maintained. Was having lived here for many, many years, a lot of those characteristics have already gone. So I'm just wondering how you're going to keep and maintain what we've got left.
So with regards to the needs of the current and future communities, that's part of where we in particular look at, it's a bit of the housing business assessment work as well as what you have in front of you today, but it's comparing what our makeup of households currently and into the future looks like. So particularly one of the key findings we've had as a district more broadly is the need for 1 and 2 bedroom homes. We've got a lot of 3, 4 plus bedroom homes, and we've discussed previously at the table that's some of the drivers from the market, some of the developers, what sells, and so how we kind of make and help those meet the needs and what's coming through is the purpose of putting some of this information on the report, just to see whether changes are happening and whether there are things afoot to help do that. So that's an example of that needs of current and future, about how all the bits of work actually come together to help inform decisions from external people, but also supporting the work from the housing strategy and other work we do around the edges to kind of help those broader needs too, because some of them go into the social end of the spectrum. The unique characteristics, some of the work that we yet to do, and it pertains particularly to some of the changes coming through in the market, but also under the proposed plan changes, is some of those changes we've seen around intensification and understanding some of that. Previously, we've mapped some of our housing and where, just to see the hot locations of growth, and surprise, in a lot of areas it's large sites and greenfield, particularly in Waikanae and towards Otaki. But more recently, of course, we're experiencing a bit more intensification of our town centres. So it's actually something Aston and I had a discussion about the other day, and we might look to bring through as part of one of the next reports, is actually being able to map some of this visually, spatially, and just get a bit of a flavour. And it's an area we need to do a bit more work on, as how we capture information and layer it as to the types and nature of housing come through. It's a little bit rudimentary at the moment, just counting the high level numbers, but we want to understand some of those different typologies coming through. So it's something we're talking with our building colleagues within the business here and housing strategy team, because Stephen is interested in some of the housing strategy work too, and we're seeing how we can blend that together to again inform many discussions, but also just to see what's happening on the ground a bit more clearly.
Okay. So do you work with real estate agents as well to see what houses are selling, whether they're more 1 bedroomed or 3 bedroomed or 4 bedroomed, or what the market's like?
I think we see a lot of the sales data. We tend to, I think we're hoping to find a lot of the new stock coming through and what typologies that is, to see how that's responding to the current needs in the market as an indicator as well. But we do look at overall housing sales. But again, we do know that a lot of those housing sales are based on, and we do know existing housing stock sizes, give or take, which is where that predominance of 3 bedroom plus higher buildings comes from.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just I've lived here majority of my life, and I've kind of seen all the changes happening in Kāpiti, and you know, I was here when there was only a few hundred people here, and it's kind of like growing so much, and so I'm just old. Thank you.
To check your photo collection out of the mower that were here at the same time. But okay, Alec, thank you very much for that. I just wanted to finish off by just noting what you were saying around nothing really leapt out at me with regards to support, but the numbers, although they're being the same, they're coming from different sources. You know, a lot of larger developments, so that mapping exercise would be quite interesting to get a handle on that. And Kathy, in regards to what you're talking to, one of the things that jumped out to me about central government has advised that anticipates managing for growth as early as possible, so that the region districts will ensure that the unique characteristics and need of respective communities can be nurtured and maintained. Now, that's the exact opposite of what's happening, in my opinion, with regards to this plan change, with regards to our character areas, which is a big part of us being caught up on the fringe of a Tier 1 council as well. And I think we need to be pushing back in that space, and because the unique characteristics of our townships is actually, to me, what makes Kāpiti as such. Thank you very much for that report. Rightio. So I am going to ask for someone to move us into public excluded. I want us to basically declare we're in the public excluded space, and then we'll have a break for a cup of tea. No, we'll do that afterwards. Yep. So moved. Do I have a seconder? Second. All those in favour? Aye. Oh, sorry. Hang on.
Sorry, the Democracy Services team have just flagged that there were some recommendations relating to the previous paper. Did you want to move them, or a recommendation?
Yes, we would. Yep. Yes, we would like to move the recommendations. Thank you very much. Second.
Councillor Wilson.
Yep. Passed. Done. Cool. Thank you, Katie. So we'll just go through that process again. I'd like to move into publicly excluded. Do I have a mover? A seconder? And all those in favour? Aye, right, done. So what we'll do now, guys, is have a 10-minute cup of tea, and then we'll go into the report from that, and then we'll come out of public excluded, do members' business, finish off with the confirmation of the minutes.
Very well done, Mr. Chair.
It's all right, we're 5 minutes out.